Good morning. My name is Claire Clark and I'm from Dynham. We are supporting Highlands and Islands Enterprise to deliver this event today. It's great to have you all with us for this next session in our NEXUS webinar series. A very warm welcome to you all. Before I pass you over to Andrea McCall from HIE, I'd just like to spend a minute explaining how we will run today's webinar. As an audience member, you are automatically muted, but we have a couple of ways for you to get actively involved. You can use your question box at any point throughout the webinar, and we'll pick up as many as we can during the Q&A. You'll also see an icon called the raised hand icon, and during question time, if you've got a mic and you want us to take you off mute, then just click on the icon and we'll get you connected. And finally, we always want to promote knowledge sharing and collaboration, so we do record every session. We will, of course, share the recording after the event, so you can watch again or share with anyone else you think may be interested. That's all from me just now. I'll pass you over to Andrea, who will introduce today's speaker. Andrea.
Thank you, Claire. So yes, thank you all for joining us today and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Andrea McCall from the Life Sciences team at Highlands and Islands Enterprise in Inverness. And before we start, I just wanted to give you a quick insight into the NEXUS webinar series. It's an opportunity to find out more about what is going on in our life sciences, health and technology community, and also an opportunity to make new connections. And in case you don't know, NEXUS is our co-working space. It's located in Solaster House on Inverness campus. And life sciences and technology companies can co-locate there and also collaborate. And NEXUS is funded by the Inverness and Highland City Region deal and also European funding. So today, I'm delighted to have Marc Strathie with us, the Head of Policy and Research at ScotlandIS. And ScotlandIS is a trade association championing Scotland's digital technologies industry. He will tell us a little bit more about climate tech and the digital opportunities available for businesses. We're just looking forward to hear from Marc now. So Marc, please, if you want to start your slide deck.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you for having me today as well. It's good to be here virtually in the Highlands and Islands, and hopefully next time we can maybe do this in person. So, good morning, folks. So, as Andrea said, my name is Marc Strathie. I'm the Head of Research and Policy at ScotlandIS. I'm not going to bore you too much with who we are, because Andrea's already kind of said a little bit about that, but we like to see ourselves at the heart of Scotland's digital community economy, and try to drive that forward and work with members and partners to support wider transformation of business as a whole, but also, you know, public sector, academia, and so on and so forth. We support about 1,500 companies across our membership, our cyber, and our data clusters as well. So our membership's kind of the sort of bread and butter, if you like, but we also have some specialist cyber and data clusters as well that really focus on those communities as a whole. So I'll try and get to the meat of today's discussion around climate tech. So climate tech has probably really, in the last couple of years, really came to the forefront of the agenda in the digital sector as a whole. And for me, when I think about climate tech now, I think the easiest way to describe it for those of you that aren't as familiar is probably looking at the parallels it has with clean tech as well, because climate tech is so broad that it encompasses a wide range of technologies and industries. And I mean, I'll do my best to cover a few of them today, but by no means will it be exhaustive. I think possibly the key differentiator between climate tech and clean tech is climate tech has the technological solutions mixed in with the urgency of the climate crisis. So what that kind of creates a kind of mission element behind some of these businesses that we have today as well. So not only are they there to deliver digital solutions, but they also have a real passion to deliver net zero and our targets at 2045. So that's probably the key differentiator with clean tech, is that there's a bit more of a kind of mission behind some of these organisations that we have. So climate tech research in Scotland, to be honest, over the last couple of years has been pretty thin on the ground. ScotlandIS were the first ever kind of body to do Scotland's first ever kind of look at Scotland's climate tech sector. And I've just popped a link in there if anyone wants to read that report in more detail. And then on the back of that, there was that kind of, we started to see a bit of momentum being built up And from there, we also partnered with colleagues at Scottish Council for Development and Industry, BT, and the Royal Society of Edinburgh. And the purpose of that report was to look at innovation in climate tech as well. So it's actually a really exciting time to be working in this space, because there is a bit of momentum starting to brew. So yeah, I think the future is really bright here for Scotland. So as I said, climate tech includes a wide array of technologies that operate across key sectors, and it's really, really difficult, in all honesty, to pin down what those key sectors are for a report. But for the purposes of our report, we focused on energy, the built environment, land use, and transport, because, as I said, there's so many, and hopefully one day we'll look at some of the other kind of sectors there. And we also tried to look at some of the opportunities that climate tech can offer Scotland's future economy and our workforce as well. And we tried to identify those key areas in market demand, and also what the investment pipeline is, because it's great to have these technologies, but there has to be a viable investment pipeline so that they can actually flourish and develop as well. So, with us being in the Highlands and Islands, albeit virtually, I thought I would kind of touch upon some of the kind of strengths and whatnot in the region. So, as I'm sure all of you will be more familiar than me, the region's home to Scotland's largest offshore wind farm, the world's largest tidal stream array, and the world's most powerful tidal turbine. So, there's certainly quite a lot of world-leading innovation and technologies in the Highlands and Islands. And Highlands and Islands also has a large percentage of our national onshore wind capacity and most of our hydro capacity as well. And it's currently producing 300% of electricity demand from renewable sources, which is a fantastic feat. And considering we're almost now at 100% renewables in Scotland, that is, to have such a large proportion of that coming from the Highlands and Islands is absolutely fantastic. So some of the key areas in the kind of Highlands and Islands are certainly, to the outside looking in, focus on kind of Caithness and Sutherland, and they're home to what's called flow country. Now, I'm not sure if any of you will be familiar with flow country, but it's Europe's largest expanse of blanket bog and some of the best example of its type in the world. Now, where this is really invaluable, actually, particularly in the kind of years ahead as we look to COP26 and beyond, is the capture and storing of carbon and also removing it from the atmosphere as well. So I think this is, for me, if there was something that someone could have pinned me down and said, where is the real opportunities for Highlands and Islands, I think it's very much in that carbon capture and carbon storage piece, and I think that's absolutely kind of critical. But kind of looking at some of the, I suppose, some of the issues that are kind of underlying in the region. So the region accounts for just over half of our landmass, but as you'll know, only around 9% of our population. But some of the highest rates of fuel poverty and highest price per unit of electricity across the UK are in the Highlands and Islands, and that is despite of the energy infrastructure that's in place. So and I know, I'm sure you've all seen the news over the last couple of weeks where some of the energy companies going bust and whatnot. So I think we will certainly have to be a bit more creative when we think about how we are gaining access to electricity and gas for the next few years or however long that will be in place. So those are kind of some of the key areas I think the region will have to look at moving forward. Oh, I think my presentation is a little stuck. Oh, sorry about that, folks. So yes, moving on to the next kind of theme, or the first theme, if you like, in our report. And we focused on energy here. Now, energy worldwide is the dominant contributor to climate change. So you'll see there, it accounts for about 60–70% of total greenhouse gas emissions. In actual fact, that figure's probably more like 75–80% now. But let's just say 60–70 for argument's sake. But actually, in Scotland, the reason why we kind of looked at energy and felt that it was one of the kind of key sectors to focus on is that we really saw that as being one of the sectors that was most advanced to facilitate collaboration between energy and climate tech as well. And it's great that most days in Scotland we are enjoying electricity generated from renewable source. And I just want to draw your attention to the graph on the left-hand side there. So, as I mentioned, we're almost there in terms of 100% renewable energy, and in some places we will be enjoying 100% renewable energy. But that figure there was around 89.5, and that was in 2019. I think the last figure I saw was around 93%. So you can see that hopefully in the next year or two we will meet that 100% renewable energy. So I just wanted to draw attention to a couple of kind of case studies that are going on in Scotland right now, across the full country. And Scottish renewable software developer NEN, they're in the midst of doing a new cost predicting algorithm, and that software for me I think will be really, really important. And it goes back to what I said earlier on today about the cost aspect of energy companies as well, because this software is actually going to help to deliver the best commercially viable green energy platforms as well. And hopefully what we'll see then is that will accelerate some of that uptake in green energy, because a lot of people out there want to do the right thing, a lot of businesses out there want to do the right thing, but for whatever reason, it could be due to cost, it could be due to a lack of time. They don't necessarily have the time or resources to spend looking at the best deals or providers or whatnot. So hopefully that'll be a kind of new and innovative development that'll help. And I'm sure you're all familiar with Wood Group, Scotland's largest PLC. They've actually developed a really interesting platform in Vision, and that actually kind of gives us some governance and insight around some of the emissions that are caused and carbon releases around our cities, any organisations, our built environment and assets as well. So that kind of gives us accurate information as to where the big carbon releases are coming from and where some of the biggest emissions are coming from. So moving on to the built environment now. Where we live in our housing can have an absolutely massive impact on the environment, and sometimes, I guess, we've all got a kind of degree of ignorance we possibly don't actually understand, or we don't actually comprehend just how much an impact that can actually have. And even in the UK, construction emissions alone could be cut by 40%, and that's just through better design, more intensive building use, and also reusing building resources. And of course, that's enabled by digital technology. And a lot of this comes back to the kind of circular economy. So how do we do things a bit smarter? How do we reuse things as opposed to just kind of tossing them to landfill? So this is kind of where the direction of travel is going in this way. But there is still a lot to do. So, emissions from heating in all our buildings across Scotland need to reach net zero, or need to reach zero by 2045. And we really, really need to drastically reduce this, because right now one of the key issues is poor energy efficiency. And on top of creating more demand, what it also does, it's actually a driver for fuel poverty as well. So it's kind of a double whammy, if you like, in that sense. And heating buildings right now is currently accounting for about 20% of our greenhouse gas emissions, which is quite a lot when we think that globally, for example, digital and tech accounts for somewhere between sort of 1% and 3%, and that includes all the massive data centers and whatnot. So that gives you just an indication of just how much heat accounts for gas emissions there. And in terms of what's kind of going on in this space, so there's been quite a lot of really interesting stuff. So Scottish SME OnGen, who are based in Edinburgh, they've done a lot of really interesting stuff around building stocks, particularly focused on academia and industry as well. And some of their software kind of focuses on how do you provide greater security of supply, but also how do you reduce the carbon footprint. And what they've done recently is identify 4,000 tonnes of carbon savings in the University of Edinburgh's building stock. So that's an absolutely massive amount, particularly an institution like the University of Edinburgh as well. One of the real interesting things around the built environment, and one of the things I think where digital is going to have a kind of key role to play, is around digital twin as well. Now, a digital twin is going to be, for the next kind of years ahead, I think it's going to be absolutely crucial. And Glasgow-based IES, what they've been doing is looking at how you can use a digital twin to understand what's inside the building and also associate carbon footprint and make those changes remotely as well. So, for example, if you want to kind of know what's going on behind a building or whatnot, instead of essentially bursting a building down, you can actually see behind it and you can actually capture those emissions and whatnot as well. So I think this is going to be a kind of area to watch here, particularly in the years ahead, and particularly as we think a bit more creatively around our built environment and whatnot. The third kind of area we looked at, and probably the area that's kind of most interest, I suspect, to the Highlands and Islands, is around our kind of land use and food kind of relationship as well. So, I mean, particularly, our relationship with food, agriculture, forestry, is absolutely crucial in our race to net zero. We need to think more creatively about food production, how we can decrease emissions, cut down on waste. I mean, I thought this kind of stat here was particularly poignant, that according to the FAO, if food waste was a country, it would be the third highest emitter of greenhouse gases after the US and China, and a worse threat to our environment than plastic. Now, I'm sure we've all kind of heard anecdotally or even in detail about the US and China and plastic as well in the ocean and whatnot. But the fact that food waste would be third behind that just gives you an indication of the scale of the problem here. But it's not all kind of sort of doom and gloom, if you like. Artificial intelligence has a key role to play in this as well, and AI will hopefully reduce the need for chemicals and excess water because of the precision it can gather through agriculture and minimising food waste as well. Because what will help long term as well with food waste is actually, instead of having demand that we don't really know what it's for, we can actually forecast some of this demand and actually identify what do we need, as opposed to this is what we can produce. So it's about kind of, again, it goes back to that cutting down on the waste, and even if we do have waste, let's kind of reuse it as well. And another component to this that again I think is another kind of real opportunity for the Highlands and Islands is around vertical farming. Now, where vertical farming has immense benefits is that it can settle anywhere, independent of climate conditions as well. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on right now across Dundee and whatnot. And actually, I know that Intelligent Growth Solutions have ambitions to expand to the Highlands and Islands as well. And I also think a key aspect as well, over the pandemic, what we've seen is we've all tried to shop a bit more locally. We've all tried to kind of support the local supply chain. And vertical farming has the benefit to actually be able to do that, focus on that kind of supply chain and consumer as well, and really reduce the journey time. So instead of getting your avocados flown in from Peru or Bolivia or wherever it may be, you're getting it, 5 miles down the road. And as I said, Intelligent Growth Solutions are really taking this a stage further. They're number one, they're kind of focusing on that, reducing emissions in farming and agriculture, but they're also, trying to create more sustainable and economically viable jobs in the farming and agricultural sector. And I know initially they faced a bit of backlash, is probably not the right word, but they faced a bit of resistance in terms of, would this take jobs away? But in actual fact, this is complementary to farming and agriculture. This is going to, in my opinion, will revolutionise the farming and agricultural sector. So I don't see it as being a threat. I actually see it as being very complementary. And the Scottish Agricultural Society are doing some really interesting stuff around a new platform they've developed called Carbon Positive. So this initiative kind of looks at gathering data on soils, woodland, water, renewable energy to create and convey a message around the positive contribution of farms and crops and capturing carbon and mitigating climate change. And I think this is a really important initiative as well, because it changes the narrative around farming and agriculture as well, because I appreciate that the farming and agricultural community have had a lot of flack over the last few years around the climate agenda as well. But I think it's important to sometimes focus on the positives that this can bring to our journey to net zero. And then finally, the kind of last area that we looked at in terms of sectors was around transport. Now, transport is going to be a key area that we will need to focus on if we really want to meet net zero, because prior to COVID, the demand for transport services was just growing and growing and growing, and it was actually one of the only areas that had an upward trend of CO2 emissions. Even some of the other areas I mentioned, farming and agriculture and whatnot, some of them were actually seeing a kind of a downward trend of CO2 emissions. But in actual fact, and I actually suspect this is going to get worse, because in the last year or so, COVID, we've all been told, get out, drive, don't use public transport. So that's actually, if anything, just going to exacerbate this as well. Now, EVs are I think we can all agree that they are going to be the future, but there are some issues here. So despite the fact that the UK, we're actually one of the largest EV manufacturers in Europe, we still haven't really fully switched to EVs and integrated transport. I'm sure some of us might see the odd Tesla on the street or whatever, but it's by no means the kind of dominant kind of car that we all see now. Predominantly the cars we still see are petrol and diesel. And the issue is we've got here is that, you know, there's just not enough smart charging, you know, and we need this to, because right now what's happening is the vehicle to grid network is just having such a massive demand, and we can't support it. But that being said, you know, if we did, you know, fully move towards EV to support the grid and properly invest in it, then we could save the energy system up to 270 million in avoided network upgrades and lower peak energy demand. So, you know, there is a positive story here, but there is going to be a few kind of areas that we need to factor in, you know, government support, business support as well. So it is a complex picture. And there's a lot of fantastic stuff going on in this as well. You know, particularly in the northeast of Scotland, actually, you know, there's a lot of exciting low carbon initiatives taking place. You know, Aberdeen's, you know, kind of a world renowned success story for hydrogen buses. Dundee's got UK's largest electric taxi fleet. And the one I kind of want to draw your attention to as well is that one at the bottom there, and the new hydrogen accelerator to be established at the University of St Andrews. And that is going to be aiming to work with businesses and communities right across Scotland, looking at the role of hydrogen in our future economy. So for those of you who are possibly on the call interested in hydrogen, then by all means, I would encourage you to keep your eyes on that. So I mentioned at the start there, the kind of investment landscape. Now, overall, I think we are well placed in Scotland to support the climate tech ecosystem. You know, our innovation hubs, you know, whether it's the Data Lab, a Construction Scotland Innovation Centre, you know, we've got quite a strong pipeline there of innovation. And also, in addition to that, the new Mitchell and Scotland Innovation Park at Dundee is going to be very much focused on sustainable mobility and low carbon energy. And it's going to have, you know, business, academia, and, you know, schools and everything kind of coming together. And I think there's something really powerful in that, having that kind of hub that all aspects of an ecosystem can come together, not something for just business or academia or you know schools or whatever. Having a place that everyone can kind of come together and have that knowledge exchange, I think there's something certainly powerful in there. But in terms of the actual investment, the hard investment landscape, climate tech fund is coming from a kind of range of investors. You've got your traditional venture capitalist firms, you've got venture funds that specialize in energy and, you know, sustainability, but then you've also got kind of global conglomerates such as Microsoft and Amazon, who have got these sort of funds that are specifically available for climate tech companies as well. So there is a few kind of different aspects of investment that companies can look towards. Now in the UK alone, Techstars raised a staggering 1.4 billion this year, and climate tech and clean tech firms were actually the ones who kind of raised the most capital. So again, you know, the landscape is certainly very, very positive. You know, we can see a direction of travel here, as well as to where the future trajectory of investment is going. And like I say, you know, I think overall, you know, Scotland is in a good place to develop this ecosystem. And once we do that, you know, we can put Scotland on the map. You know, we can export this capability to the rest of the UK and indeed the world as well. And for me, I think the prize is compelling. You know, we've got that aspect of sustainable economic growth, but we've also got the preservation of our ecosystem as well, and a world-class, you know, green tech ecosystem, which is something that, you know, I'm very passionate about. But I realise, you know, to make this happen, you know, we have to close the technology gap. We have to make sure it's on a regional basis, and we need to maximise this for everyone. It's no good, you know, Glasgow and Edinburgh being the hub of tech, you know, the hubs of, you know, tech, world-leading tech innovation, if, you know, the Highlands and Islands in the south of Scotland are sort of left behind, because we've made this mistake far too often before. So I think it's important. Yes, we want to get this right, and yes, we want, you know, areas of excellence, but we have to have it on a kind of nationwide scale. And finally, I just want to encourage everyone on the call to, you know, please do get involved. You know, our Climate Tech Hub, you know, has all the latest events and case studies and resources around it. You can access the full report here as well. And, you know, hopefully over the next couple of years, we'll see that hub really, really develop. So far, you know, in the lead up to COP26, it's been really busy. It's been a really popular time for it. You know, a lot of demand. So, you know, please get involved. And thank you for having me today. You know, very much look forward to any questions you might have, and look forward to hopefully seeing you all in person one day as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. That's great. Thank you so much. Now, we've had a couple of questions submitted, which is great, but there's still time. So if you've got a question, use your question box if you'd like to ask us anything. First one is from Karen Gordon. What role could climate technologies play in the Highlands and Islands post-COVID economy?
So I think in terms of the Highlands and Islands and the post-COVID economy, I think it absolutely can play a key role in the Highlands and Islands. And I think, as I said there, I kind of highlighted a couple of the kind of areas there that I think would be of real interest to the Highlands and Islands. But I think it's gave us all a chance to reimagine what our economies can look like as well. Because in actual fact, you know, what COVID possibly did show Scotland in particular is that we have been guilty in the past of being a bit too reliant on certain aspects of our economy, such as hospitality and tourism. However, you know, those are absolutely still going to be pillars of Scotland's economy. There's almost no doubt about that. But I think it's just a case of we need to make sure we have a more diverse economy as well. So that's certainly something that I think that all regions in Scotland need to look towards. But I think for the Highlands and Islands, again, you know, there's so much rich resources there as well. As I mentioned there, you know, 300% of renewable energy, you know, those are some of the areas that, you know, I think the region really has to focus on. And that being said, I think a lot of the kind of infrastructure that's in place, you know, such as like University of Highlands and Islands, DHI, Highlands and Islands Enterprise, there's a lot of great support mechanisms already in place. So I think, you know, moving forward, I think climate technologies can play a key role in the Highlands and Islands economy. And, you know, I think, you know, moving forward, one of the challenges is going to be how do we make sure that that message gets to, you know, central governments, and how do we ensure that the region has representation at the very highest levels of government?
So how do we do that, Mark?
Well, I think, you know, like stuff like this is really important, you know, in the sense that, you know, it's really important to engage with, you know, others in the kind of sector, but also equally, you know, engaging with those out with your natural kind of sector as well, you know, such as digital or energy or whatever. Because, you know, for me, as I mentioned there, one of the things that when I was doing this research I found fascinating was the amount of similarities the digital tech sector had with, you know, construction, energy, you know, even food and drink. We looked a bit about the food and drink as well. So I think it's about looking at, instead of looking at just our own sort of narrow sectors, it's important we kind of keep a broad mind as well. So I think for me, that's the kind of key area there, and ensuring that we engage with all aspects of the economy, not just the people that we may be familiar with or the people we may know. So that for me is the kind of most powerful thing to do.
Great, thanks, Mark. And now a question from Gavin McLeod. What are some of the key opportunities you envisage for climate tech, especially in the Highlands and Islands?
So I think certainly the kind of renewable energy piece is absolutely is going to be critical for sure. I think that'll be, you know, a real, and in actual fact, it's already a strength of the region. But in some ways, when you've got a strength, you know, you really want to hone in on that and ensure that it becomes a pillar of your economy. But there are some areas there where I see potential for the Highlands and Islands, such as the vertical farming as well. And I think what that could do is, we all know, you know, agriculture and farming have had a really, really tough time over the last couple of years, you know, with, you know, tariffs before and Brexit and whatnot. But I actually think vertical farming offers an opportunity to actually revolutionise the region as well, and also revolutionise those communities as well. And it gives a kind of injection and a new lease of life into those communities as well. And also, there's an aspect here of attracting new talent as well. You know, how do you get more kind of young people involved in the farming sector and agricultural sector as well? So I think it is a very much a kind of win-win, if you like. I think another area that the kind of Highlands and Islands can certainly focus on is around the peat and forestry restoration as well. Again, where the region's located, it's rich in that data as well. And I think, you know, the university and DHI and others, you know, capturing some of that data as well, and ensuring that, you know, we have some of the best reporting standards across Europe and the world. I think it'd be something really powerful there for the Highlands and Islands to actually sort of lead that charge as well. So those are a few areas. I think there's, there's opportunities for businesses, there's opportunities for academia as well, and people like Highlands and Islands Enterprise as well are that kind of natural facilitator, if you like.
Great, thanks, Mark. Another one from Gillian Murray. She is asking, should policy focus more on reduction of food waste if it's such a big contributor to emissions? So what should the focus be on working with?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I think it absolutely should. I mean, I think in fairness, in Scotland, there is a lot of good work going on right now around this. So like Zero Waste Scotland, for example, are doing some fantastic stuff around sort of food waste as well. But we certainly still are a bit behind the curve. For example, a number of years ago, I used to live in Bristol, and Bristol used to have the food waste boxes about. I mean, I'm going back sort of 4 or 5 years ago, and even so, I live in Falkirk now, and we still don't have that there. So it should. I think the question from Gillian is a good one. I think policy focus should focus on that, because it's in some ways you want to sort of tap into those areas that are kind of some of the biggest contributors. So I think we should be kind of focusing a lot on that as well. But I mean, again, there are some positive stories starting to emerge. I noticed the other day there that ASDA, and there's an ASDA in Glasgow now, and it's became the first in Scotland that you can take your own containers and fill up with, I think, things like coffee or pasta or rice or whatever, instead of the pre-packaged goods. So I think the food waste one's going to become, I think in the next coming years it will start to develop. We've even got the deposit return scheme coming to Scotland in the next coming years. So I think there's momentum building. Whether or not it's quick enough in terms of a race to net zero, and it is a race, I don't know. And I mean, I'm sure some of you may have saw the other day, actually, I read that Boris Johnson was 60% sure that the UK will meet the net zero targets by 2050. Now, Scotland's is obviously 2045, but if he's 60% sure that they can make that, I'm not entirely sure we are more or less advanced than them. So it just kind of goes to show you we are, and when we say the race to net zero, I very much emphasize it as a race. There's no doubt about it.
Great, thank you so much, Mark. Andrea, have you got any other? That says all with the audience questions. I think. Have you got anything else?
Oh, I think a question just came in actually. It just popped up in my box there.
Oh yeah, let's have a look. So this is from Philippa from Nature Scot. Nature Scot has a really big interest in carbon capture and sequestration and habitat restoration. How do we ensure that in Scotland we are working together across sectors to identify projects, the data we need, and how we measure success? Thanks, Philippa.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Nature Scot are doing some fantastic stuff. They're actually doing a really interesting project with one of our members, Space Intelligence, on that very subject as well. And I think, the key point that Philippa mentions there, and it's something I kind of mentioned throughout my presentation, was that collaboration between cross sectors. Because one of the things I think we've all been guilty of in the last kind of couple of years is saying it's farming's fault, or it's aviation's fault, or it's food and drink's fault. So we kind of look at it's not our sector's fault. Digital, it's not our fault. But in actual fact, this is a global, and it's a sectoral problem across all sectors. It's not a case of picking and choosing whose fault it is. So I think for example, Nature Scot, are doing some fantastic stuff with a number of different companies as well. And I think what we need to see is absolutely more of that cross-sector collaboration with different sectors, because we do have so much in common. There's no doubt about it. Even for example, the digital sector. One of the biggest problems in the digital sector when we look at kind of climate change and whatnot is around data centers, right? And for us, data centers, what we need to do is we need to work with renewables and energy and look at ways that we can actually make some of the energy far more renewable than it actually is, because right now it's by far in a way digital's biggest kind of emitter. So I think there's something really powerful about what the likes of Nature Scot are doing, focus on that cross-sector collaboration as well. And I think, you know, what is also great, what I've noticed about likes NEXUS Scot as well, is that nationwide approach as well. And it's something I kind of mentioned as well, that, you know, it's no good us having just projects in, you know, the Central Belt and focusing on them, and if we don't have that regional spread. So what I would emphasise is, yes, this has to be on a cross-sector basis, and we have to work with a range of sectors to ensure that we meet our net zero targets. But we also have to make sure that we focus on a kind of regional aspect as well, because again, it's not one sector's issue or problem or whatever, but it's also not one region either. So we have to kind of look at it on a cross-sector basis and on a cross-regional basis as well.
Great, thanks so much, Mark. Okay, that's us finished with the Q&A session. I'll just pass you over to Andrea, who will say the final few words for us.
Yes, thanks, Claire. And thanks, Mark. That was a really, really great presentation and run through a lot of different aspects, and lots of food for thought, I think, there for everyone as a personal, you know, consumer of food and other products. And I guess in the wider sense, as you said, how we as a society and all the different sectors work together, and how we could all, you know, help each other, I suppose, in the race to net zero. So lots of interesting stuff there. Thank you. I just wanted to point out one other project that I'm aware of. Well, I don't know much detail about it, but I think there's also a project on the Orkneys. It's around hydrogen-powered ferries. So I think it's called the High Seas project. So just wanted to put that out there as well, in case anyone is interested and wants to have a look at that. There should be information online about it. But just at the very end, before we close, I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to the next two webinars in our series. So the next one is going to be on the 5th of October, and it's about the STEM subjects, so science, technology, engineering, and maths, and how businesses can help inspire a future generation of STEM professionals by working with the Science Skills Academy. So Emma Robertson will join us for that session. And then the session after that will be on the 26th of October, where we'll talk about the new Lyme app. So this is an app basically that is a tool and this helps to manage your exposure to ticks and Lyme disease. So we'll be joined by an SME called ID Maps, who have developed this app, and also someone from Scotland's Rural College, SRUC, who've been involved in the development. If you want to book onto any of those sessions, please just go to the High website under events and training, and you'll see them listed there. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today, and thanks again very much to Mark for giving up his time and sharing his insights with us today. Thank you. Back to you, Claire.
Thanks, Andrea. On behalf of Highlands and Islands Enterprise, thank you for a great session today, Mark, and a final big thank you to everyone that came in to join the webinar. Our post-event survey will pop up straight after this session, so if you can spare a couple of minutes, it would be great if you could complete that for us. Thank you very much for your time and have a great day.